EdTech Monday Africa is brought to you by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT and MasterCard Foundation Young Africa Works. Here to lead the discussion is our new host and moderator of the EdTech Monday Africa show, Joy Doreen Bira.
Hello and welcome to EdTech Monday Africa. Glad to have your company on yet another important discussion on education technology in Africa, made possible by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT. The sole purpose of these EdTech conversations is to support the growth of an impactful African EdTech ecosystem that will catalyze innovation and advance promising practices in the use of ICT in learning and teaching to benefit African learners, educators, as well as policymakers. This month, our focus is on using EdTech to enhance internet safety for learners in Africa and how EdTech can not only create awareness, but also help prevent different types of attacks. Why, you might ask? Well, the adoption of e-learning technologies in Africa continues to grow, with reports indicating that the e-learning market in Africa is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 11.2% between this year and 2027, catalyzed by the proliferation of smartphones and other consumer electronics, along with the rising digitalization in the education sector in Africa. And no doubt, with increased integration of ICT into education has come concerns from parents, teachers, and school management on the dangers the internet poses to learners as they increasingly adopt technology in learning. Cyberbullying, online predators, and many others prompt the need to understand the risks and threats to young learners online and strategies for making classrooms safe, and the role of parents and caregivers in protecting their children as they study online. The question is, what safety measures do you take to protect your children as they study online? Do share your feedback with us on EdTech Monday at mastercardfdn.org. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and our panelists are Isabel Bachard, Regional Manager, Private Sector Partnerships at UNICEF's Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office, Kaburo Kobia, Head of Production, Akili Network, and Fiona Asonga, Chief Executive Officer, Technology Service Providers Association of Kenya, TESPOC. Ladies, it's so good to have you join the EdTech Monday Africa conversation. And to begin with, I'm curious to know, what unique dangers do online learners face vis-a-vis in-person learners, and whose responsibility is it to protect them? Fiona, let me start with you.
Hello, Joy. It's a pleasure to be on the show today. And I think one of the things that I need to say is that online learners are getting vis-a-vis the ones who are having in-person engagements is exposure to everything that there is on the cyberspace. So think about cyberbullying, which you mentioned in the introduction. Think of any tech-assisted crimes that may happen. And we've seen an increase in those as more children got online. There's more exposure. Kids are vulnerable. They're not able to identify an adult who's pretending to be a kid. So they get lured into situations that create a problem for them in their normal environments. And so we're finding children are getting kidnapped. So kidnapping increases when we have more children going online because of the lack of the ability for children to make some decisions. So you find it is a situation that is tech assisted, but the crime just keeps on getting more. Then we've got issues of cyberbullying by their friends, by other people online who do not know them, strangers. It's very funny that online people tend to gang up very quickly and to target one person, and they can make your life miserable. And sometimes they forget that they are dealing with children. And these are young minds that need to be protected and to be shielded from some of the crime that is going on. Then there is a lot of content that is inappropriate for children, that children get exposed to, especially when they're using devices that are used by adults as well. So you find the adults in their environment are going on to content which the children shouldn't have. Then they take the same device and give it to a child when that content is still open. That exposes the child to what is inappropriate and may affect their ability to make certain ethical, social decisions because of what they're being exposed to. So it affects the development of their minds. And these are things that we are trying to pay attention to as service providers. And so you find at the end of the day, the question, whose responsibility is it, keeps coming up. But I think from the experience I've had, especially with the onset of COVID and the increase of children going online, is that it starts also with the children. There's a level of responsibility with the children and with their parents in the environment that they are living in. We encourage children to always use, if you're going to use devices, make sure there's an adult with you, or there's an adult supervising what you're working on or what you're doing online. When you get something you do not know, especially the pop-ups of inappropriate content, when something pops up, don't open it. Please share with an adult, let them tell you what to do or close it. And so a level of responsibility starts with the children being made aware of what they can do. Don't open pop-ups. Don't go into any link that is sent to you. Don't just click on everything. So things like that help the child to be responsible. Then when they go to social media, we encourage the children to always have an adult as their friend, a mother, an uncle, a big sister, or someone who can always be there just watching and seeing what contents comes onto their platform, because that helps them to have a level of cushioning and guidance. In the event of stalkers and in the event of cyberbullying, then their child is protected. And it has helped a number of children in schools that TESPOC has been called to talk to and to just assist. Some of the cases that we've followed up on are cases where if an adult were present, there would have been some intervention much earlier and the child would have been assisted, but we still go ahead and work with the children and counselors to assist.
All right. That's interesting that you actually do involve different stakeholders in trying to assist and make them understand the responsibility. Isabel, in terms of the role of policy, what role does policy really have to play in enabling online safety for young learners? Because this really seems to be a big issue, and because e-learning is sort of a new phenomenon in many African countries, there's not really enough policies to guide how or how not they should be going about it. You want to talk to us about that?
Yes, and thank you, Joy, for having me today in the show with the other wonderful panelists. I think Fiona has already nicely touched on some of the risks that children are facing. I do want to say, though, that access to online learning per se is not bad or harmful. It does bring a lot of advantages to play, learn, and socialize, but it does also kind of amplify risks that we see in the offline world, and it creates new forms of risk that can then transform into harm for children. So in that context, national policies are indeed fundamental, providing for the right policies to protect children in the digital world. And as Fiona touched on, the responsibility starts with the child. It really touches on many stakeholders to provide for that protection and safety, but ultimately the main responsibility lies with our national governments and policymakers. So we at UNICEF, we work across multiple regions in the world on protecting children in the digital world. And specifically, we have focused on online child sexual exploitation and abuse. Let me just share with you that in a recent study that we conducted with global partners such as Interpol in a study in Eastern and Southern Africa, it did show that up to 18% of internet using teenagers had been suffering from a form of online child sexual exploitation and abuse in the past years. So it is definitely an area where 1 of 5 children have reported having been exposed to that risk and having suffered harm. And national policies are required to deal with that and really to bring about also the knowledge and information from its key society stakeholders, like the private sector, the tech companies, but also teachers and parents. And we at UNICEF work closely with governments to advise them. We have seen lately, I think, a good example in the Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe that was enacted last year, where indeed the risks that Fiona and you also mentioned are being addressed in terms of really strengthening the position of the victim, also strengthening and enforcing the responsibility of the online service providers in helping tracking down harmful content, removing it, but also the procedures that are needed to track down offenders and bringing them to court. And I think it is important also to realize, Joy, that oftentimes offenders are children themselves. And so the way how we handle that needs also to happen in a child appropriate manner. So national policies are fundamental. Over to you.
National policies are fundamental. Kaburo, what do you think? Are there any effective policy examples we can refer to? And possibly this is something that also Fiona can touch on. And Isabel just mentioned Zimbabwe, but what other effective policies do we need to have?
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Joy. It's a real pleasure to be here with all these other panelists as well. Yes, I think in terms of policy, there's a lot of strong policies here in Kenya, at least. Where we always face challenges is in the implementation of those policies and the awareness of those policies, where parents and teachers and children are concerned. And Fiona at TESPOC and Isabel at UNICEF will really know a lot more about these policies. But for us at Akili Network, what we're really concerned is ensuring that the policies or the directions that we want to implement in terms of keeping children and families safe online are presented in a child-friendly manner so that children are able to also consume and understand what their responsibility is. I think both our panelists today have talked about how important it is for the child herself or himself to be responsible online. But that communication has to come to them in a very child-centered way. And that's where we come in, that's where we as a Akili Network try to provide content that's developed for children and in a language that they're able to understand.
Right. Fiona, effective policy. Do you think the current policy around e-learning, or in this case, education technology, is effective enough, for instance, in Kenya?
Taking Kenya as a case study, I would say that it is the Kenya Information Communication laws that are guiding the level of engagement and child online protection for now. Mm-hmm. We are yet to integrate and make amendments to our education policies so that they align. There's been effort to work on the Children's Act so that it also aligns to the same and ensures that there are sufficient protections for children online within the Children's Act. However, the Kenya Information and Communication Act has been very effective, and so has the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act. In terms of enforcement, we are using those in partnership with other stakeholders to create the awareness. Why? Because the Ministry of Education has not picked it up. So we are having effort being driven by the Ministry of Security, responsible for matter security, and the ICT Ministry, because we are having to deal with the crimes as they happen. The Ministry of Education has a very critical role to play, but it has not yet worked on its policies so that then there's clear systems of even ensuring what kind of skill set do we want in a school as the children go online. We have got a lot of effort being done by other stakeholders within academic institutions and centers of learning where children are, but we are not getting sufficient support from the Ministry of Education. So there are gaps that need to be addressed. And I'll say there may be countries where they have been able to have clear communication policy, clear security policy, and a clear education policy to facilitate protection of learners online. And why? Because online safety is not something that can be handled by one entity alone. The more we go online, the more we have to be multifaceted in how we approach issues. And that means that there has to be a multi-stakeholder approach as a basic principle of addressing anything within the cyberspace, within our online engagements. And so we still have quite a bit to do for a lot of countries within the African continent to be able to ensure that we achieve that ideal and effective policy environment for young learners that is multifaceted, multi-stakeholder involved, and everyone is able to play a role in ensuring the safety of the learners, and their policies coming in from all the different directions that now are centralized around the learning environment that make it conducive for learners.
All right. Isabel, if I might come back to you, what role, if any, can mobile and internet service providers play in keeping young learners in Africa safe online? Because there seem to be so many policy gaps, not just for the Kenyan example that Fiona has mentioned and the Zimbabwe example that you mentioned earlier. But then how do you think the mobile and internet service providers can keep our learners safe online? Where do we start?
Thank you, Joy. I think we touched upon it already a bit earlier in terms of the ability to use the technology to block certain content. First of all, to track it, to block it, to remove it, and also helping then in the next step of law enforcement to track down the offender. At the same time, the companies also have a responsibility to inform and raise awareness what is possible in terms of, for example, parental control, or how the user, him or herself, whether it's a child or an adult, can do best to protect themselves. Also pop-up windows that caution you about, giving away too much information. I think in one of the shows that Kaburo supports, it's like hashtag too much information. I think also the mobile network providers and tech service providers can do a lot there. They can inform the policies that we spoke about. They themselves need to be regulated by the policies, and of course they need to support them as much as they can do through their technology, their reach to the customers, and then also through their connection with law enforcement.
All right, Fiona, before I come to you, Kaburo, Isabel just mentioned, and it's something that I wanted to actually ask you about, pop-ups. You might create child-friendly content, but you're not fully aware about the pop-ups that will come up on the end user's consumption side. So how do you even guard against that, or do you leave that entirely to the internet service providers?
I think mobile and internet service providers have a huge role to play in keeping children safe. I think what they have to really keep in mind is how to equip families and children to understand what happens, to live a life, a successful and safe life on the internet. So their role, I think, it's not to just think about children when you're presenting children's content to them, but for mobile providers or internet providers, always have information available to teach children, people, adults, all the time. Just have information to help children understand how they should be behaving online. I think that's hugely important. What Isabel was referring to was the TV show that we've produced for teens and young children and families at Akili Network. It runs on Akili Kids, and it's called Flash Squad. So the idea of Flash Squad is really to educate children even before they go onto the internet, to give them confidence and that savviness to operate online. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not only when you're online that you have to start teaching children how to be safe online. This has to start even before and outside the internet. And we just have to continually train young people, because right now the reality is, especially post-COVID, is that children will go online at quite a young age. I believe in Kenya, the average age that children access a mobile phone or the internet is 15 years old. So as Fiona was saying, Fiona, do you disagree? Is it even younger? Even younger.
Yeah, it's much younger.
Yeah, and young people, if you think about the development of young people, before they're 15, it's very hard for them to discern between people who are being honest and not being honest. So the role of keeping children safe doesn't happen, just that pop up when you're about to access child-friendly content, it really should be something that we're doing constantly in school, out of school, on TV, radio, and throughout the children's life, because this is going to be essential for young people to be savvy and confident on the internet.
Right. Fiona, very briefly, if you could touch on that, the issue of data security is a really big issue. And maybe if you could just highlight what it takes to have that intact, the data security part.
Just to pick up from where Kabura has left off, I think there are other areas that service providers are currently doing, being that I run a service providers association, that are helping keep children online safety. And part of these include, like I'd said much earlier, I talked about a multi-stakeholder approach to issues. So that has to constantly be something that everyone is working on. So one of the things that I've seen some of our members in the industry, service providers, training caregivers on how to use the different tools that are available. You've talked about pop-ups, but the truth about pop-ups is that pop-ups are managed from an end user's device. There isn't much that a service provider can do with pop-ups popping up on your devices. But many users of technology are not aware. They may have the skills in terms of going online, skills in terms of looking for what content they want, but they're not aware that their device has to have certain controls enabled on it to be able to protect them. So that awareness is something that many of the service providers, the mobile operators, the ISPs are doing to be able to get everyone aware. Then these issues of training the learners. So like I mentioned earlier, TESPO goes to schools and we train the learners on how to use technology and how to keep themselves online. And then there is also an aspect of the application side of things where we are trying to encourage platform and application developers to have appropriate safety settings and ratings for their platform, so that then that way we know what kids can access and what cannot. And we've seen it happening with the YouTube. We've got YouTube for kids, and then we've got the normal YouTube that everyone uses. And many application and platform developers are following that, taking suits. Then when it comes to issues of data protection, this has to be ingrained in all our policies. It has to be the way in which we act. So first of all, the children need to know that you do not share certain information. How does that happen? We have to train the learners. And that is why we spend time as TESPOC in schools, talking to computer clubs, talking to schools, and just letting them know, don't share everything. Don't tell people you do not know what you cannot tell a stranger. Don't go to meet strangers. Do not give out information about your parents' details, where they work and their phone numbers and home addresses and things like that.
Actually, that also does beg the question about whether or not, parents are concerned about their own children's safety online and how they interact with these devices and the content that they're always churning out. And we did ask some parents what kind of conversations they have with their children, what their concerns are about child online safety, and also what is their understanding of the potential dangers, as well as, the different things that they expect their children to be doing online. And these were some of their views.
The biggest concern I had around safety was having intruders, having predators disguise themselves as fellow children. Because I heard stories of other kids who were deceived by grown-ups to think that they were children. So for me, that was a huge fear. Another fear I had was the kids being exposed to inappropriate content, because you're not there when they're attending those classes to monitor the kind of content that they're exposed to.
There's always that tendency to stray to other platforms. So usually that's the part where I worry about. So most of the time I've had to always be following what they are doing. Because one moment they are studying, the next moment an ad breaks through. It's a song, it's a dance, it's a product that is probably not age appropriate for my kids, especially because they are under 10 years old.
One of the things that I have done is to be open about the risks of the internet, the evil and the dangers that lie with the misuse of the internet. I'm very open, and I discuss the dark web with the children and all the bad things that can arise from the internet.
And going by those views from the parents, what kind of support do teachers need? Because many times the focus is on the learner and whether or not they're getting the content right, if they're using the devices right. But what support do teachers need to enable them to keep their students safe online? And I'm going to start with Isabel.
Thank you, Joy. Well, to start with the basics, they themselves need to have access to the internet and have the devices for that. I mean, that sounds very basic, but it's not a given. Yeah. And we work also a lot with mobile network operators and international partners and governments to connect school to the internet, provide them devices, and train teachers on how to use them. So digital literacy skills among the teachers also need to be given through training. And we as UNICEF have developed also with governments safe world-class education and learning platforms. And so using these recommended learning platforms, for which again, in partnership with mobile network operators, we get free access. We provide free access to the students and teachers to those platforms. We are creating a high quality learning space that also provides the right safety, because it leads to learning material that is provided through these platforms.
Many parents across Africa also do lack these digital skills, but how can they play a role in keeping their children safe online? Kaburo, what are your thoughts around this?
So we've also been talking to parents, and we've heard a lot of the same things, same concerns that parents have with their children going online. I think studies show that the parent has to use the same apps as the children in order to keep them safe. So you can't keep your child safe from, say, an application like TikTok if you're not on TikTok. But I'm sure a lot of parents are not even interested in going on, some of these platforms. But it's so important. You have to understand what it's like. How do people reach out to your child? How does your child respond? If you've never seen the application, if you've never seen the tool before, how can you possibly keep your child safe? So it's really tough. What we're trying to do is through our TV station, the TV program we have on our station, is role model that. So at least you're seeing it on the screen. You're seeing young people using this technology and going through some of the challenges and resolving them through the TV show that we have, Flash Squad. So that's one of the ways that we're addressing it. But I think it's crucial that parents and teachers have access and try and go on these platforms, because you won't be able to keep your child safe if you don't use the platform itself. So yeah, it's tough, but that's you have to go online and you have to be online. And I think, as Fiona said, be your child's friend, or have the same, be linked to their account, have your email linked to their account, so that you can really keep them safe.
Right. Isabel, you want to add something onto that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, it's the universal parenting challenge, isn't it? I think important aspect of it is also to have, an honest and frequent conversation about what your child does, how he or she interacts also with people in the internet, whether it's through games or other social moments, which are also very important for the child. So I would not recommend to parents to block that. It's a very important component for their development. But As we have talked about the risks, there are also commercial risks we haven't touched upon. Children are the future buyers of products and services. And here also it needs awareness of why someone is approaching me, why I'm seeing this commercial all the time, etc. So having these conversations and being with your child, and also having the tolerance that you might find one day that your child has actually not been a victim, but rather an offender, and also being able to talk about mistakes that your child has done, and being open also when you see that it has been a victim, to knowing where to turn to, I think is a very human and important component for all the parents here in the region, but really across the world.
And I guess the challenge to parents or caregivers right now is just to monitor their children's content consumption, just to figure out what kind of content they're consuming and making sure that it's the right content for their specific ages. And then the question to us all now would be, what can EdTech companies do? Because in addition to having internet service providers, they are the EdTech companies that churn out this content. And I think, Kaburo, you're actually one of the biggest EdTech content networks we have across the region. What can be done, or what can EdTech companies do to support the safety of online students and supporting the range of their understanding, given the potential dangers that they might encounter online? Because there's so much as well that goes on between parents, teachers, and the learners themselves. EdTech companies have a role to play, but while we're also advocating for the learners themselves to have a certain understanding of what they should expect online, we can't just take chances. So do we have some good examples of the existing products that are tailored to the African context and with safety measures put in place that other schools or other consumers can pick from across the continent?
I think there are a lot of examples of what companies, mobile companies and internet companies are doing in Africa and around the world to keep children safe. I think this is definitely a concern for all the technology companies. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at Akili Network. So Akili Network launched Akili Kids, which is Kenya's first children's TV station. We reach almost 10 million children and families every week. The growth of TV watching in Kenya has more than doubled. It's almost at par with radio. So we're using this opportunity to really reach families and children with information on how to be safe online. Our approach is to build confidence. We've heard about the dangers of the internet today, but Isabel has also talked about a lot of the opportunities there are on the internet. And as we said, for a lot of kids, they had to go on the internet to access their education during the COVID years. And then, yes, there's so much you can learn. And in the future, you will use the internet as a young adult, and you will use social media. So we use a whole child development approach, build confidence in the child, build savviness in the child, and then most importantly, let children understand that you have to have a trusted adult as well that you can talk to, and not, and keep the experiences you have online just to yourself or to your peers. We always, in our TV show that we produced addressing internet safety called Flash Squad, which launched in May this year, 2022, we end it with a little little phrases at the end of what children can do when they face certain challenges. So it's a comedy TV series. It's short. It's 7 minutes long, and in it it's set at a high school in Kenya, and you see these young people go through different challenges online and resolve it at the end of the episode. And then they're given like 3. So I think Isabel, you quoted the one about hashtag too much information, which is one of the episodes where one of the students overshares online. And so at the end, you're reminded what to do if you feel that you're oversharing, or you've something bad has happened to you because you've overshared. So we found it to be really effective. We're actually running a study right now to find out how well it's doing with families. And we'll have that data pretty soon, asking the same questions you've been asking parents today. And so we're really excited to see how they'll be responding.
Fiona, in terms of the operational and technical measures, Textbook plays a big role in terms of putting in place maybe children's rights or digital rights, and giving those to the internet service providers. How has that gone so far, and what lessons can the rest of Africa learn from Textbook as the Technology Services Providers Association of Kenya?
Well, what we've been able to do over a period of time is try and work with the service providers to ensure, first of all, that they are committed to ensure that children are safe online on their networks, and especially those who are offering connectivity to schools. Then also making sure that there is an approach to the children and to schools of privacy and safety by design. Already, the law doesn't allow images of children being shared on different platforms. So that such content should normally be, they should pay attention to that kind of content and make sure that they're handling it in the right way, whether it's a news item, whether it's a private conversation or details. So unless it is the security services that are looking into an issue, the child's data and images and details are supposed to be protected. So that being what the law says, then the environment already is pushing for child online safety. Then we've got a lot of children who we are also working with to encourage them to be the future of technology for our region. So we've got institutions that are developing skills from coding skills for children who are as young as 5 years old. And these are encouraged to be online. We spend time with them to just make sure that there is what we would say productive internet use amongst the children, amongst the learners, so that they can be able to think creatively, develop games, play games, explore and innovate online and still be safe and feel safe. So for Kenya, these are the things that have been done, and I think have been replicated around the African continent in several countries, where I've come across entities that are running programs to just make sure that children are staying safe. Children know what is expected. Their guardians are being given the right support, and parents are being taught on what needs to happen. I think, unfortunately, where the whole link breaks is the role of the parents. Parents sometimes are so busy that they expect that the academic institution or the learning institutions will help to support in some of these areas. And so not intentionally absconding their responsibility, but sort of handing it over to another entity. And the schools can only do so much. As a parent, there are tools, so many applications available that enable you to know what your child is doing online. And you don't need to also be with the child. You can be far away. I'm sometimes in the US and I'm able to know what the children are doing on their respective devices. Why? Because we use a tool that lets you know if they've downloaded new content, if they've gone to a new site, how much time they're spending on particular sites, how much time they're spending on different games and things like that. So you can see what the child is doing with the device that you've given them, and you can put limits and control and even have a conversation with the child about how they're using their device. What is responsible use of technology devices? What is responsible use of technology platforms? That is the role of parents that we need to play, parents need to play, and we need to be able to just see how that works, because service providers, I think, are doing the best that they can. The schools are trying with existing policy framework to do what they can do. But I think at the end of the day, I would say it's a dance that needs more than one dancer, and we need to hold our hands and just do the gig.
I like that. It's a dance that needs more than one dancer. And speaking of dancing, we asked the parents themselves as well, what their understanding of the potential dangers are, but then also what they're doing about it. And they had some pretty interesting views about this. Let's take a look.
I supervise. I ensure that they use the phones where I can see them. And then I always have random checks. I always have random checks. I ask them for the phones at any time. And so they know that somehow I'll be watching, and they need to be responsible.
We have what we call put in place parental controls in terms of what the kids can get to watch vis-a-vis what the other household can also get to watch. But that notwithstanding, we still have some age inappropriate content so filtering through from time to time.
My husband and I had a couple of precautionary measures that we put. For instance, some sites were inaccessible by the children. The time frame of when they can use those computers, they needed permission from myself or my husband, so we had to actually approve signing to their device for them to be able to access specific sites and content on the internet.
And well, with those responses from the parents, what are our parting shots in terms of, using EdTech to enhance internet safety for our learners? I'll start with Isabel.
Thank you, Joy. This has been a great conversation. Really, I think maximizing the skills and the expertise that EdTech can bring into the topic along the whole spectrum, what we discussed in the past half hour or 45 minutes, really from using the technology to drag, block harmful content, also showing how to track down offenders and whatnot, but also keeping in balance the commercialization, perhaps contributing to awareness raising. Like in Kenya right now, we have a fantastic campaign called Spot It, Stop It, that is addressing violence against children, and it also has an online component. And within that, there's a lot of information that is also being made available by service providers to parents and teachers, how they can play a role. So I think it is really perceiving themselves as being part of the community and as being part of a solution provider, and informing also national legislation and helping obeying to it and enforcing it. I think that's really the role they can play.
Fiona, in about a minute, how do you think EdTech can not only create awareness, but also help prevent the different types of attacks in parting?
As a parting shot, I think that EdTech can help create awareness to learners through like what we've done this afternoon, this panel discussion, and just making sure, encouraging as many young learners to come on and watch it as much as possible. But more than that, is more importantly, is for the learners to be able to pick out of the conversations we've had this afternoon and know what they want to start on, depending on where they are at in their respective countries, and pick an area and work on it and pay attention to it, and then be transparent and accountable in how you approach your cybersecurity issues and your online protection issues. And that means that you need to work with others. When we say multi-stakeholder, we're not just talking about multi-stakeholder in terms of teachers, parents, and industry. We also need the children, the learners, to remember that there are other stakeholders in their space, themselves, their siblings, their relatives, their families.
Yeah.
Those are also, so having a multi-stakeholder approach that will help them have systems within the social setting that cushion them and protect them every step of the way.
All right, Kaburo?
For me, I would say to parents and teachers watching, watch Flash Squad, our TV series that we produced. It's a short comedy series, and it's a great conversation starter for you and your child, the child that you might have at home or that you're teaching. We cover data protection, bullying, so both the behavior and the data protection. So I would say, yeah, watch Flash Squad from Akili Kids.
Ladies, thank you all so much for such a great, informative, as well as knowledgeable session that we just had here on EdTech Monday Africa. We were speaking to Isabel Butchard, who is the Regional Manager of Private Sector Partnerships at UNICEF's Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office. We also had Kaburo Kobia, Head of Production at Akili Network, as well as Fiona Songa, the Chief Executive Officer at the Technology Service Providers Association of Kenya. Thank you all so much. And remember, you can watch more of this content on the Mastercard Foundation YouTube channel, or you could check out the Young Africa Works Facebook page for more. And do leave a comment. We love to read your feedback. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. I'll see you again next month. Thank you all for watching.
EdTech Monday Africa is brought to you by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT and Mastercard Foundation Young Africa Works.